I'm Emily Carter, a 32-year-old creative director living in San Francisco, CA, and I thought I knew exactly where I belonged. Until tonight. The sun was just dipping behind the redwoods when I slipped on my favorite chambray jumpsuit and stepped into our backyard oasis. Lanterns glowed over picnic tables laden with grilled shrimp skewers, avocado corn salad, and artisanal cocktails that I'd spent the afternoon perfecting. Neighbors and friends laughed around fire pits. My best friend Madison was already sharing her latest travel tales by the lemon tree, while Jessica from down the street kept passing me oysters on the half-shell with a wink. I was at ease, tongs in hand, mixing mint with gin. My signature Carter cooler. Then my phone buzzed. One thumb swipe and everything shattered. A single text from my father-in-law read, "I'm sorry, Emily. There's simply no room for you at Lake Tahoe this weekend." My stomach dropped. The laughter around me blurred, the lanterns flickered, and in that moment I realized this wasn't just about a vacation. It was about being erased from a family I thought I'd found my place in. I'll never forget that crisp November morning last year, the sun low and golden over Napa Valley as I pulled into my in-laws' driveway. I'd flown in from San Francisco the night before, my carry-on crammed with camera gear and a suitcase full of last-minute hostess gifts, 2 bottles of Duckhorn Chardonnay at $45.00 each, a box of artisanal dark chocolate truffles $38.00, and a handwritten note I'd practiced drafting until it felt warm and genuine. As I stepped onto the gravel, the vine-covered facade of the Collinses' farmhouse loomed ahead, its weathered stone walls dusted with autumn light. I felt that familiar flutter of excitement mixed with just a hint of nerves. This was my first Thanksgiving as part of the family, and I was determined to get everything right. Inside, a crackling fire welcomed me. My mother-in-law Evelyn Collins greeted me with a hug that smelled like lavender soap and laughter. "Emily, darling, you made it," she said, her Pacific Northwest accent dancing through the air. She led me into the kitchen, where the aroma of fresh sage, roasting turkey, and baking pumpkin pie intertwined in a way that felt like home. I rolled up my sleeves beside her, learning her technique for trimming the bird. She slicked it with a butter, lemon, and thyme rub that cost her roughly $12.00 for a dozen fresh thyme sprigs and 2 pounds of European butter. As we worked side by side, she told me stories of her own mother's Thanksgiving feasts back in Seattle, painting picture after picture of a family bound by food and tradition. My husband Mark popped in from the living room holding our blending of vintage photography skills and creative direction had finally paid off. I'd been tapped to shoot a holiday campaign for a San Francisco winery, a project that paid me a flat fee of $7,500.00 plus expenses. It was this success that made today's visit feel especially triumphant. I'd proven myself capable, both professionally. He handed me a plate of prosciutto-wrapped asparagus, Evelyn's latest gourmet twist she'd read about in Bon Appetit. I bit into one, savoring the salty ham and tender green stalk, and realized I'd love having a family that not only accepted me, but welcomed my own passions into the fold. By mid-morning, friends and neighbors began to arrive. Madison, my college roommate and confidant, pulled into the driveway in her black Volvo XC60. She'd driven down from Sacramento with her husband and 2 kids, braving the holiday traffic, and showed up bearing her famous cranberry orange relish, which she'd whipped up with 3 pounds of fresh cranberries for $9.00. I had planted the seed earlier that this might be more than just an in-laws dinner, that it could be an intimate gathering of my chosen family alongside the Collins clan. To my delight, Evelyn agreed to let me host a friend's table in the sunroom, where the walls were lined with framed vineyard prints and a vintage record player spun Motown classics. Jessica, our next-door neighbor, arrived shortly after and plopped down at the long farmhouse table with her teenager in tow. She'd brought a pumpkin cheesecake from a boutique bakery in Sonoma, which carried a $60.00 price tag, but promised to be worth every penny. While she set it on the sideboard, I arranged place cards I'd designed the night before, each printed on linen-textured cardstock for $1.50 apiece, featuring a custom watercolor vine motif. Mark quipped that I was turning Thanksgiving into a small-scale production, but I didn't mind. This was exactly the kind of detail-obsessed celebration I lived for. As the oven timer buzzed, Evelyn presented me with a tour of the property. We wandered through the apple orchard behind the house, rows of gnarled trees heavy with late-season fruit she'd hired a local harvester to pick for $250.00. The crisp air was full of promise, and I felt a warmth spread through my chest that had little to do with the swirling leaves at our feet. Pausing beneath a canopy of branches, Evelyn placed a gentle hand on my arm and said, "Emily, you've brought so much light to these gatherings. We're grateful you're here." Even now, I can feel the soft tremor in her voice that spoke of acceptance and genuine affection. Back in the kitchen, I took over basting duties as the turkey roasted to a perfect 165 dF, checking the internal temperature with my digital probe thermometer, a $35.00 kitchen gadget I've come to adore. I drizzled the pan juices over the bird every 20 minutes, infusing it with flavor and keeping it moist. Beneath us, the marble countertops were spread with bowls of mashed sweet potatoes whipped with goat cheese, $8.00 per log, and maple syrup, and the green bean casserole with its crispy onion topping, two family staples I'd mastered under Evelyn's watchful eye. Around the table, conversation flowed like vintage wine. My sister-in-law Heather, a marketing executive in Los Angeles, recounted her latest campaign success, $120,000 ad buy for a streaming service that Marcus had helped negotiate. She teased me about my own creative diva reputation, and I laughed, tucking my hair behind one ear. The kids played hide-and-seek in the living room, their laughter echoing off the cathedral ceiling. Madison and I exchanged knowing smiles, remembering our college days hunting scholarship money for weekend trips. Those same weekends where our bond was forged over thrift store finds and midnight brainstorming sessions. Finally, as the turkey came out of the oven and the table groaned under platters of food, we gathered. I stood, glass of sparkling rosé in hand, a limited bottling that retailed for $28.00, and said a quiet blessing of my own making, a wish for gratitude, love, and belonging. The air was thick with steam and the scent of rosemary. Plates clinked and forks dug in. I looked around at every face, some bound by blood, others by choice, and felt an overwhelming sense of connection. In that moment, I believed I had truly found my place. Later, after the dishes were done and the fire had dwindled to embers, I slipped into the guest room, where a plush pillow cost $120.00 fluffed beneath my head. As I drifted off, memories of the day played back like a carefully edited film. The laughter, the warmth, the feeling that I had finally bridged the gap between my past and this new family chapter. Little did I know, that sense of belonging was about to be tested in ways I could never have imagined. But for now, I savored the comfort of that Thanksgiving in Napa Valley, where I first felt wholly seen and valued. I'd been looking forward to that Lake Tahoe weekend for months. Back in August, when Mark casually mentioned that his parents were renting a chalet at North Star for a family and friends retreat, I felt a thrill go through me. A 2-night stay in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath slopeside cabin? $600.00 per night, plus a $150.00 cleaning fee. Sounded like the perfect escape from my city routine. I'd already budgeted for my share. $350, 0 cents for my portion of the cabin, $120, 0 cents to rent a Jeep Grand Cherokee for the drive up, and another $80, 0 cents for gas and incidentals. I pictured snowy pines, mugs of hot cocoa by the fireplace, and long walks along the frozen lake. In early November, I sent my RSVP via group text to Evelyn Collins and Heather Collins, CCing Mark. Emily here. So excited to join you all Deck 5-7 at North Star. Let me know if I can help with groceries or prep. I added a winking emoji, and within seconds my phone buzzed with thumbs-up reactions from Mark and Jessica, our neighbor. But when Evelyn replied, her message was colder than I expected. So sorry, Emily. No room left. Hope you understand. My chest tightened. I reread it 3 times, half expecting autocorrect to blame the typo. But the words were unmistakable. No room left. For the next hour I hovered in a daze. The kitchen lights blurred as I loaded the dishwasher. I forced myself to text back. I understand logistics can be tricky. Let me know if there's a way to make space. Nothing. 24 hours passed. No apology, no follow-up, just radio silence. A week later, at Mark's company holiday party, Heather Cornerstone, his older sister and a platinum card-wielding marketing exec in LA, cornered me by the hors d'oeuvre table. She was clutching a flute-sized glass of champagne that cost who knows how much. I'm so sorry about the cabin. But trust me, they booked for 120 people already. You know how my mom loves to over-invite. She flitted off, leaving me clutching a plate of shrimp toast. That night, I sat on our couch, the glow of the Christmas tree lights doing little to warm my mood. I opened my email, searching for any mention of the chalet. No itinerary, no cabin address, no group list. Then I remembered. Jessica had posted a sneaky boomerang of the welcome sign Mark's parents had installed at the chalet entrance. I tapped her DMs. Hey, can you send me the chalet address? Want to map out my drive? No reply. It felt deliberate. 2 days later, I received a forwarded invoice from the chalet management company Heather had accidentally CC'd me. It was a 12-page breakdown. 4 cabins booked under Collins Family Retreat, totaling $28,800, 0 cents. Ski lift tickets for 120 guests at $85, 0 cents each. Catering reserved for 120 at $65, 0 cents per person. Even a group spa package for 20 at $120, 0 cents per head. I scrolled, heart pounding, until the guest list excerpt. 40 names on Cabin A, 35 on B, 45 on C. My name was nowhere to be found. I stared at the screen so long I forgot to breathe. At 33, I'd weathered plenty of rejection. Last year's pitch for that $50,000 0 cents ad campaign that fell through. The gallery that passed on my landscapes series. But this felt different. This was about family, belonging. The invoice locked in my worst suspicion. I'd been deliberately excluded. I tried to talk to Mark that evening when he got home. His furrowed brow told me he'd heard about Evelyn's message. He sank into the armchair, phone in hand. I'm really sorry. My mom said the chalet's at full capacity. She thought it best to keep it to blood relatives this year. Blood relatives. The words tasted bitter. So Jessica and her fiancé count, but I don't? My voice quivered. He ran a hand through his hair. It's not like that. They just wanted a traditional family gathering. Traditional, a hollow justification that only drove home how non-traditional I was in their eyes. I didn't sleep that night. My mind replayed every holiday gathering with the Collins clan. The carefully curated photo albums, the family-only ski weekends, the invisible barrier I'd never noticed. Until now. The next afternoon I drove to my favorite cafe in Pacific Heights, $4.00 oat milk latte in hand, and opened my laptop. I drafted an email to Evelyn. Dear Evelyn, I've never felt so excited about a family event. If logistics truly prevent my attendance, I understand, but I'd appreciate clarity. Did I miss an earlier deadline, or was I unintentionally left off the list? Your guidance would help me plan. Warmly, Emily. I hovered my cursor over send. 1, 2, and I clicked. 24 hours later, the only response was a polite read receipt. My stomach knotted. I felt stranded between civility and confrontation. That evening, the group chat lit up with photos. A towering chalet decorated with wreaths, tables laid with cedar plank salmon and handcrafted sourdough buns, string lights framing the balcony where 120 wine glasses waited. Laughter echoed in the gifts, and Mark's smiling face turned to camera. Can't wait for next week with you all. My phone rang just past midnight. The unfamiliar number displayed North Star Events. I debated ignoring it, maybe spam. But something in me answered. Hi, is this Emily Carter? A firm, cheerful voice asked. I swallowed. Yes. Who's this? This is Ari with North Star Chalet Management. We noticed an unpaid balance of $350.00 under your name for cabin bookings day 5-7. We wanted to confirm if you'd like to complete your reservation. My blood ran cold. I'm not on any booking. Ari paused. That's odd. The invoice shows you as a guest on cabin B, room 2. My breath caught. But I wasn't invited. I'm sorry, Ms. Carter. I'll escalate this to our events coordinator. I hung up before she could clarify further, my mind spinning. Had Evelyn tried to include me, then rescinded at the last minute? Or was this some administrative glitch? I sank to the floor, back against the wall, and let the tears come. The betrayal stung sharper than any rejection I'd felt before. My family of choice, my circle of friends, creative partners, neighbors, had welcomed me. My in-laws, whose house I'd called my second home, had slammed the door. As dawn approached, I packed a small bag, journal, camera, my favorite chambray jumpsuit, and slipped out. I didn't know where I was going, but I had to get away from the quiet tension of our condo. The weight of being almost family pressed on me. I needed answers, and more than that, I needed to decide what to do next. Then, just as I was about to shut my front door, my phone buzzed again. It was Mark. Emily, call me ASAP. Something just came up. My heart lurched. What now? I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and dialed back. Whatever this weekend held, exclusion, embarrassment, or something worse, I was determined to face it on my own terms. The real journey was about to begin. I woke before dawn on December 5th to the bleary gray of a Lake Tahoe morning. The chill seeped through my jacket as I slid into the Jeep's heated seats, the dashboard clock reading 5:47 a.m. I replayed Mark's urgent midnight text. Something just came up. I didn't know if I should feel dread or resolve, but I knew I couldn't wait for an explanation. I punched in the chalet address into my GPS, and 15 minutes later, the Jeep rumbled up the winding road to the North Star gates. The security guard's breath puffed in the cold air as I handed over my license. You here for the Collins retreat? He asked, scanning his clipboard. I nodded, heart pounding. Name's Emily Carter. He flipped through pages. Nothing under that. My throat tightened. I think I'm in cabin B, room 2? I tried to sound confident. He frowned. Let me check the online roster, He tapped away on his tablet, then looked up. Nope, no Emily Carter here. My chest constricted. I have an invoice, I said, fishing my phone from my pocket. I brought up the PDF Heather accidentally forwarded, the 12-page breakdown showing my $350.00 balance on Cabin B, Room 2. He swiped through it. All right, Ms. Carter, looks like North Star's got you down, but Colin's family retreat is full. I'll radio the event coordinator. I gripped the steering wheel as he radioed. Minutes ticked by, the Jeep idling in silence. Finally, he waved me through. The gates clanged open, and I drove up to the sprawling cedar lodge where warm light spilled from mullioned windows. I parked near the rear entrance, shoulders aching with cold and nerves. My breath steamed as I grabbed my coat and purse. I wasn't sure what I'd say or do once I was inside. Pushing through the double doors, I stepped into a cavernous foyer decorated with pine garlands and oversized red bows. A roasted hickory scent drifted from the banquet hall ahead, but as I drew closer, the sound of conversation and laughter felt foreign, guarded. A host in a black blazer greeted each guest by name, handing them a custom embroidered North Star beanie, $25.00 retail, and a holiday mug stamped Colin's Family Retreat 2024. Hi, I said, trying to keep my voice level. I'm Emily Carter. I believe I'm on the guest list. She scanned her clipboard. Nope, no Emily Carter here. Are you with the Collins corporate group? No family retreat, I stammered, but I have an invoice. My phone buzzed. It was a story notification. Madison had tagged me in an Instagram recap. I opened it. Twist. The Instagram post. Madison's story showed a grid of professionally shot photos. 4 long banquet tables draped in white linen, each labeled Table A, Table D, D. Underneath, a graphic read, 120 guests, 3 nights, D58. Welcome Collins family and friends. At the bottom corner, a tiny line listed the dinner seating plan. Table C was subtitled Creative Allies. My name was nowhere to be seen. My heart thundered. I tapped back to the chalet staff. There it is, I said, flicking my screen toward her clipboard. She glanced, brow furrowed. Those stories were posted 5 hours ago, she said. Looks like online, but in person, I've got no record of you. Before I could respond, a booming voice echoed through the hall. Gather round, everyone. We're about to kick off the Collins Family Retreat Welcome Breakfast. A man in a tartan blazer, my father-in-law, Richard Collins, strode to a makeshift stage beside the buffet line. He tapped the mic. Good morning, friends and family. His smile was gleaming, practiced. Emily, well, not you, Ms. Pardon me. Someone's at the back there. He peered through the crowd. We're thrilled to have our 120 guests here. Let's show them some Toho hospitality. My breath caught. Not only had he omitted me from the event, he was publicly acknowledging the exclusive group without a hint that family and friends didn't actually include me. I tried to stay calm, reminding myself that confronting him in front of 120 people would look unhinged. Still, my palms were slick, my vision narrowing to the stark realization I wasn't welcome. I edged toward the breakfast buffet, hands shaking as I poured myself a mug of spiced apple cider, $6.00 per cup. At the lodge's cafe, I scanned the trays. Smoked salmon canapes, quiche Lorraine, caramelized Brussels sprouts, a lavish spread that Mark's parents had contracted for $7,800.00 through North Star's catering service. Everything screamed celebration and belonging, except for me. "Emily?" Madison's voice cut through the din. I turned. Her bright face hovered between two tables, clutching her phone. "What on earth are you doing here? You weren't supposed to come?" I opened my mouth, but words tangled. I got an invoice," I said, forcing composure. "They told me I was booked." She dropped her phone on the table and pulled me aside. "Oh, sweet Em, didn't Mark tell you? They filled all the spots with blood relatives. Jessica and her fiancé squeaked in because she's, practically family. Heather booked her Pilates teacher and her husband. I tried to fix it, texted Evelyn nonstop, but she wouldn't budge." My stomach roiled. Blood relatives. I tasted the words like acid. "So my creative partners, the people I've spent $2,000 on studio rentals this year with, don't count, but a Pilates teacher does?" She looked chagrined. "I'm so sorry." Then she pointed to the stage where Richard was handing out branded notebooks, $15.00 retail, and asking guests to join the group photo by the lake. "Listen, maybe you can sneak in for the photo and then slip out? Or just go back and talk to Mark?" I shook my head, vision blurry. "No, I need answers." Without another word, I marched toward the stage. The laughter and chatter fell away around me, replaced by a low hum of the PA system. I reached Richard as he lowered the mic. "Dad," I said, voice steady despite the tremor in my chest, "why am I not invited?" He blinked at me, surprise flickering behind his carefully groomed mustache. "Emily?" He cleared his throat, scanning the 120 faces. "Emily, sweetheart, it was a misunderstanding. We were trying to keep it small, blood relatives only." My pulse pounded in my ears. "So Jessica's fiancé, who I've met twice, counts. But me, your daughter-in-law of 3 years, doesn't?" A murmur rippled through the crowd. Faces turned, curiosity and confusion mixing in their eyes. I realized the breach was more public than I'd anticipated. He swallowed. "I'm sorry, Em. We thought we could handle the seating first, and then—" He trailed off, eyes darting to Evelyn, who hovered by the buffet, arms crossed. Evelyn's lips pinched. "I'm sorry, Emily, we never meant to hurt you." Her voice was flat, rehearsed. I drew in a breath, summoning every ounce of calm I had left. I've poured time, money, and heart into this family. $480, 0 cents on hostess gifts for every holiday last year. $350, 0 cents on a cruise to join you in Alaska. To be here? And this is how you treat me? The words hit like a slap. A hush fell. Guests shifted on the frost-kissed patio, the only sound the distant rush of Tahoe's winter streams. "Emily!" Mark's voice came, quiet, urgent, just behind me. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea it was this bad." I faced him, pain and indignation warring in my expression. "Dad and Mom invited 120 people. Not one of them is me. Mark, I thought we were on the same team." He swallowed, looking stricken. "We are. I swear, this got out of hand." I shook my head. "I don't need excuses. I need respect." Twist. The hidden email thread. Pulling out my phone, I opened my email app and typed in the search bar, Lake Tahoe North Star Collins. A string of forwarded messages popped up, an email chain between Evelyn and Heather detailing guest list V3 and exclude spouse numbering. My pulse leapt as I scrolled. "We'll send Emily the invoice, but keep her off the official invite. It'll buy us time to decide if we want to include her later." My breath caught. They'd discussed charging me $350.00 to pretend invite me, then quietly decide whether I merited a real seat. My jaw dropped. I raised my voice so everyone could hear. Dad, Mom, you literally budgeted to ghost me. You even had Heather call your assistant to draft an invoice, then you planned to decide later if I deserved a spot? A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Chester, Mark's best man, whispered to his wife, "Wow, that's brutal." Evelyn's face went pale. "Emily, that..." Cut her off. "No, I've had enough. I'm done waiting for your approval." I turned on my heel and strode away, the echoes of stunned silence following me. I didn't look back. Outside, snowflakes drifted down like silent witnesses. I buried my face in my scarf, shoulders heaving. This was the moment everything fractured, the ultimate betrayal, laid bare for all to see. I realized that no matter how many hostess gifts or branded cocktails I'd contributed, I would always be almost family, never truly inside. As I trudged toward my Jeep, a single thought pulsed through me. If this was how they valued me, I'd show them what real value looked like on my own terms. And that revelation, bitter as it was, lit a spark in me that would become the foundation for everything I built next. I didn't make it 5 miles down the mountain road before the tears came. The Jeep's heated seats couldn't chase away the cold knot twisting in my chest. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as snowflakes skittered across the windshield. I tried to replay what had just happened at the chalet. Richard's rehearsed apology, Evelyn's tight smile, Heather's Pilates teacher justification, but all I felt was betrayal so raw it burned. By the time I reached the overlook, where the lake lay dark and glassy below, I pulled on to the snowy turnout. The engine ticked as it cooled, and I sat staring out at the still water, feeling completely hollowed out. I'd invested over $2,200.00 in expenses to be part of that weekend. The $350.00 chalet share, the $120.00 in gas, the $85.00 ski pass prepayment deposit, plus another $320.00 on emergency Uber rides when my tire went flat on the way up, all to be shown the door, all for a family that refused to see me. My stomach clenched, bile rising. I pressed my forehead to the cold glass and gasped for air, the Jeep cabin a cruel cocoon. The rally of giggles and clinking mugs at the retreat now sounded like mocking echoes in my mind. I thought back to the Instagram story twist 120 guests, celebrating family and friends, with me conspicuously absent. A knot tightened in my throat, and I couldn't hold it back. I buried my face in my scarf and let out a guttural sob that rattled my ribs. Minutes passed, maybe an hour. My phone lay forgotten on the seat beside me, the screen blank except for a missed call from Madison. I didn't have the strength to press call back. Instead, I unzipped my puffer coat, kicked off my boots, and curled into a ball on the passenger floor. My legs tucked under me, I rocked back and forth, tears staining the hem of my jeans. Everything I'd built, my career as a creative director, the $45,000 photography studio renovation I'd funded with a combination of savings and a small business loan, the countless Carter Cooler cocktail positives on Instagram, felt meaningless. All the late nights drafting invites, the $600.00 spent on custom linen napkins last spring, the $1,200.00 monthly mortgage on our San Francisco. None of it mattered if I could be erased so easily. I thought about every holiday dinner, every carefully curated gift, every compassionate word I'd shared with the Collins family. I thought about the $38.00 artisanal truffles I'd given Evelyn last Christmas, the $60.00 pumpkin cheesecake from Sonoma I'd brought to Heather's surprise birthday brunch. I'd believed those gestures, bought me a seat at their table. Now I realized I'd been paying for an illusion. A wave of panic slammed into me and my breath came in short, sharp bursts. My chest felt like it was caving in. I pressed both hands against my sternum as if I could hold my ribs from collapsing. The world spun. I closed my eyes and the Jeep's interior went dark. My scalp prickled. I felt pins and needles in my fingertips. Rather than reach for my phone, I let my body convulse with sobs and wondered if I was having a heart attack. The rational part of me knew it was anxiety, but the irrational terror roared louder than reason. I pressed my palms to my temples, willing my heart rate to slow. Every inhale burned, every exhale rattled me. The temperature gauge on the dash dipped lower as the engine cooled, but I felt like I was overheating from the inside out. Sometime later, I lay propped against the door, blinking through puffy eyes as dusk settled over the lake. A faint glow of streetlights reflected on the snow. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Jessica. Are you okay? You left your scarf at the chalet. I looked at the message, my fingers too clumsy to type. I wanted to reply, "No, I'm not okay," but all I managed was, "I'll be fine." I set the phone on silent. I remembered Deanne's advice. When it all falls apart, write it out. I knelt on the floor and rummaged through my purse until I found my leather journal, $22.00 from a local bookstore, and a blue ink pen. With hands still shaking, I flipped to a blank page and wrote, December 5, 2024. I don't know who I am anymore if I'm not someone's daughter, someone's wife, someone who belongs. They literally invoiced me for a spot, then called me a ghost. Why am I always one click away from being erased? The words spilled faster than I could think. I scribbled until my wrist cramped, then paused. I flipped to a fresh sheet and drew a rough lake outline, sketching the chalet's shape with thick, jagged lines. I labeled doors where they'd slammed them in my face. I sketched the stage where I'd confronted Richard and Evelyn. Beneath it, I scrawled, I need to choose a different drawing. I closed the journal, breathing slowly, as if closing a wound. The act of writing grounded me, feeble though it was. I rubbed my eyes and looked out again at the lake, now a sheet of ink-black glass. The silence felt endless, but I realized it was the first true quiet I'd had in weeks. No polite small talk, no forced smiles, no institutionalized rejection, just me and my thoughts. When my phone buzzed again, this time it was a voicemail from Mark. I erased the contact notification without listening. I wasn't ready for apologies or explanations. I felt like I'd crossed an invisible line. There was no going back to almost family. Eventually, necessity pulled me back to reality. My phone's battery hovered at 7%. I had no idea where I'd sleep tonight. Should I drive back to San Francisco on icy roads? Should I call a hotel at usurious winter rates, $320.00 for a single night in Tahoe? My instincts shouted, find warmth, find shelter, find people who actually value you. I took a shaky breath, the journal in my lap, and made a choice. I'd head north, toward Truckee. I'd find a 24-hour cafe, order a latte, one of those $6.00 oat milk lattes that always felt like a warm hug, and sit with my journal until dawn. Maybe I would call Diane in Chicago. She'd stay up for me. Maybe I'd book a one-way flight somewhere. But first I'd survive the night. I stood, brushing snow from my coat, and kicked the Jeep's door open. The cold hit me like a jolt, but I welcomed it. I slid into the driver's seat, plugged my phone into the charger, and started the engine. The heater blasted warmth into my face. I glanced at the journal on the passenger seat and realized, this breakdown, this raw, unfiltered pain, was the crucible I needed. I drove off the turnout and angled the wheel toward Truckee, headlights slicing through swirling flakes. My vision was still blurred, but my mind felt sharper than it had in days. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, I sensed that something in me had changed. I was done shrinking. And though I didn't know it yet, this emotional collapse would be the bedrock from which I'd rebuild stronger, wiser, and unapologetically real. By the time I rolled into Truckee, the sky had started to lighten with dawn's first blush. I found a small 24-hour cafe on Donner Pass Road, the rusty mug with neon open sign buzzing at 6:15 a.m. Inside, the air smelled of freshly ground espresso and warm pastries. I slid onto a red vinyl stool at the counter, kicked off my damp boots, and ordered an oat milk latte for $6.50 and a warm almond croissant for $4.75. The barista, a bespectacled woman named Claire, gave me a sympathetic nod as she set the latte before me. I cradled the steaming mug in both hands, letting the heat seep into my fingertips. My journal lay open on the counter, its pages still heavy with the night's anguish. I stared at the jagged lake sketch, then at my scribbled question. What now? My phone buzzed. A text from Diane, my mentor from Chicago. I'd texted her hours ago, emergency, need creative counsel. Now her message read, call me when you can, I'm awake for you. I tapped call, and after 2 rings her familiar voice came through, warm and unwavering. Emily, honey, are you okay? I took a shaky breath. Not really. But I'm at a cafe in Truckee. I couldn't face going back yet. Good, she said softly. Sometimes getting off the treadmill is exactly what you need. Tell me what happened. I told her everything. The texts, the Instagram posts, the invoice, Richard's speech, the hidden email thread. By the time I finished, my latte had gone lukewarm. Diane hummed, that is brutal, but I want you to do something for me. I blinked. What's that? Sit with your pain for a moment, let it fuel you, not freeze you. Then sketch out an idea for what you wish they'd offered you. Don't limit yourself, budget it out, make it real. Her words hit me like a jolt. I glanced at my journal. The jagged lake outline suddenly felt like a plan waiting to be drawn. I don't know where to start. Start with the location, she prompted. Where would you have felt truly welcome? I closed my eyes and thought back to Tahoe. The glimmer of Emerald Bay's sapphire water, the towering pines, the echo of laughter around a crackling fire. I'd once stayed at Emerald Bay Estate for a photo shoot. An ultra-luxury villa perched on cliffs, complete with private beach access and a fully staffed kitchen. The nightly rate was $1,200, 0 cents. But for a 3-day exclusive rental, they'd given me a package deal of $3,400, 0 cents. Plus a refundable $500, 0 cents. Security deposit, I jotted that down. Venue, Emerald Bay Estate. Nights, 3 Thurs. Rent fee, $3,400, 0 cents, plus $500, 0 cents deposit. Diane's voice crackled warmly through the crackly line. Go on. I kept writing. Guests, 30 creative professionals, photographers, designers, writers. Accommodations, 5 guest suites included in rental. Meals, catered by local Tahoe chef, $75, 0 cents per person per day, x 30 guests, x 3 days equals $6,750.00. Workshop supplies, art materials, notebooks, branded pens, $2,000. 0 cents. Shuttle transport round-trip SUV charter for group airport transfers, $1,500, 0 cents. Total estimated budget $14,150, 0 cents plus $500, 0 cents deposit. As I worked through the numbers, a spark lit in my chest. This wasn't just a retreat, it was a space I could call my own, one built on inclusion and creative energy. "See?" Diane encouraged. "That's your power play. You're not waiting for their permission, you're building your own table." I smiled, feeling the knot in my chest loosen. "It feels right." "Good. Now, what's the theme?" I tapped my pen on the journal, letting ideas swirl. Uncharted creativity, from rejection to reinvention. A 3-day immersive workshop where we confront what holds us back, money, ego, family drama, and transform it into art. "Love it," Diane said. "Now outline the schedule." I wrote, Day 1, arrival plus welcome reception around the fire pit. Icebreaker exercises where each guest shares a personal betrayal story and a reclaimed narrative. Day 2, morning yoga on the terrace. Workshops on narrative photography and emotional storytelling. Afternoon free time for solo lake sketches. Evening group critique over fondue dinner. Day 3, collaborative art project on the beachfront. Group photo exhibition. Closing circle with intention-setting ceremony. My heart beat faster. This was more than a fantasy, it was actionable. I looked up at Diane's voice, calm yet insistent. "Book it. Then send me the deposit invoice. I'll help you pitch to your network." Heat rushed to my cheeks. "You'd help?" "Absolutely. You have talent and vision. Don't let them box you out. They ghosted you once, now you get to ghost their limitations." Tears pricked my eyes, but these were different. Tears of resolve. "Okay, let's do this." I hung up and took a long sip of my now cold latte. I flipped to a new page and sketched the outline of Emerald Bay Estate, dotted with cabins and workshop tents. Beneath it I wrote, "My retreat. My rules." Claire the barista hovered with my check. I paid $11.25 including tip, and gathered my journal and coat. As I stepped back into the crisp morning air, I felt a shift inside me. The weight of rejection had transformed into a catalyst for creation. I drove back toward Tahoe, the rising sun glinting off snow-tipped pines, each mile fueling my determination. Somewhere beyond that lake, waiting in turquoise waters and timbered cliffs, was the space I needed to reclaim my worth. When I reached Emerald Bay Road, I pulled over to call the estate manager, a man named Victor who'd given me his card during my shoot. His voice was gravelly with mourning, but he remembered me. "Emily, lovely to hear from you," he said. "You're looking to book March 10-13? "Yes," I said, heart thudding. "For a creative retreat. 30 guests total. I have a preliminary budget, but I need to confirm availability and rates." Victor clicked. "We have that weekend open. Price is $3,400, 0 cents plus $500, 0 cents deposit. Catering packages start at $70, 0 cents per head. Workshops are your department." Relief and excitement coursed through me. "Perfect. Book it. I'll send the deposit today." "Excellent. I'll reserve those dates and email over the contract." I hung up, feeling my pulse settle into a steady rhythm of purpose. The betrayal, the tears, the humiliation, all of it had led me here, to a plan that honored my worth and invited others to share in a space of true belonging. As I continued up the pass, Emerald Bay's outline came into view, turquoise lake hugged by granite cliffs. I slowed the jeep and pulled off at a turnout, gazing at the brilliance below. The air was crisp, the sky a clear blue. I placed my hand on the steering wheel, as if sealing a promise. This retreat would be my answer to exclusion, a gathering where every seat was earned, not granted. I would no longer wait for someone else to give me permission to belong. I would create the belonging I craved, for myself and for 29 other creatives like me. And with that, I started the engine, set my GPS for San Francisco, and began the work of making my vision real. My heart felt lighter than it had in days. This was my recovery spark, the moment I chose creation over collapse. 10 days after placing the deposit on Emerald Bay Estate, I woke before sunrise with a rush of excitement surging through me. That morning, I finalized the rental agreement with Victor, the estate manager, sealing the $3,400 0 venue fee and $500 0 security deposit. By mid-afternoon, I had personally emailed each of my 30 guests, photographers, writers, designers, detailing their workshop fees, $250 0 for Lexi Martinez, $200 0 for Marcus Lee, and clearly stating the $500 0 deposit deadline of March 1st. Within 48 hours, 28 eager creatives had transferred their deposits, leaving just 2 coveted spots. To handle the influx of logistical inquiries, I hired Anna, a virtual assistant, at $25 0 per hour. She fielded questions about acrylic supplies, whether laptops were required, and shuttle schedules from Reno. Questions I knew I had asked myself when planning. Anna booked the group's ground transportation, 2 round-trip charters of a 12-passenger van, totaling $1,200 0 to ferry us from the airport to the cliffside mansion. Meanwhile, I watched the $8,000 0 in deposits clear my account and felt a powerful surge of accomplishment. With fees in hand, I ordered 30 polished metal name badges at $15 0 each, commissioned Madison to print a 4x 6-foot poster emblazoned with Uncharted Creativity Retreat for $180 0 and assembled welcome bags filled with leather-bound journals, metallic gel pens, and insulated logo travel mugs. $43 worth of goodies per guest plus tax. Adding it all up, I'd invested another $1,290 0 in those first precious impressions. As the weekend loomed, I engaged local Tahoe Productions for a 3-day livestream package at $1,200 0 determined to capture every candid exchange, each sunrise workshop, and the final communal art reveal on the private beach. By the time I returned to Emerald Bay on opening Friday, every detail was in place, and my nerves gave way to adrenaline. At 8:00 a.m., I stood at the gates of the estate, badge list in hand, as the first shuttle arrived. The morning air was crisp, the lake beneath a mirror of mountain reflections. One by one, 30 guests climbed down the vans, greeted by my enthusiastic welcome and a crisp welcome bag. Lexi Martinez threw her arms around me, eyes shining. "Emily, I can't believe I actually made the cut," Marcus Lee, grinning ear to ear, called out. "You're making Tahoe history, friend." By 9 o'clock, I climbed onto a makeshift wooden stage at the lake's edge. The gathering assembled before me beneath a flutter of cedar and pine garlands. Clutching the microphone, I recounted 2 weeks ago I was handed an invoice for $350 0 an invitation in invoice form to a retreat I wasn't invited to. My in-laws had booked 120 blood relatives while leaving me here. So today I've created a retreat for 30 true allies, creatives who add value simply by being themselves. The applause that followed felt like an exhale of every frustration and fear I'd carried. That afternoon, as we explored the estate's sunlit studio and experimented with sunset portrait lighting, a black SUV rolled through the gravel driveway. To my astonishment, Richard and Evelyn emerged in jeans and muted sweaters. No pomp, just tentative curiosity. Evelyn stepped forward. "Emily, we heard about your event. We'd like to join." Swallowing the surprise, I returned her polite nod. "I'm honored you're interested, but we're at capacity. All seats were sold for $600 each." Richard's expression flickered between outrage and embarrassment. "It's a family property," he insisted. "Surely you can find room." I leaned in, voice calm but unwavering. "I pledged 30 seats, each at $600 for a total of $18,000. That's the deal I made with my guests." With that, they retreated, heads bowed, and the rest of our group erupted into supportive applause. Day 2 exploded with creativity as Lexi co-led our morning portrait workshop on the boathouse dock. I watched guests pair off, sharing personal rejection stories before documenting each other in defiant, powerful poses. Laughter and tears mingled under the high Tahoe sun. That evening, lanterns lined the lake shore as we held a live critique. Local Tahoe productions beamed every image to Instagram with the hashtag Uncharted Emerald Bay, attracting more than 1,800 live viewers in half an hour. On Sunday morning, barefooted on the private sandbar, we installed our collective art show canvases, photo prints, and mixed media pieces bearing titles like Invoice to Empowerment and No Room to Grow. Standing on a driftwood podium, I addressed the circle of creators. We turned exclusion into invitation, erasure into expression. When a door closed on me, I built a new one, and built it here with you. Standing ovations rippled through the crowd, and I realized that every dollar I'd invested, the $3,400, 0 cents venue fee, $6,750, 0 cents on meals, $2,000, 0 cents on supplies, $1,200, 0 cents on live stream, $1,290, 0 cents on shuttle, $1,290, 0 cents on welcome bags, and $450, 0 cents on badges was repaid tenfold in community affirmation and impact. Within hours, news outlets picked up our story. A photographer from Vogue Creative reached out with an offer to publish a feature and photos for $1,200, 0 cents. Social media buzzed as Lexi's post about my creative revenge spread to 70,000 followers. Even Mark called, voice tinged with pride and regret, to tell me his parents had tried to sneak back in, and even offered a $1,000 apology gift. I politely redirected their generosity to the Future Creative Scholarship I'd founded with my retreat profits. By the time I locked the estate's gates for the last time, I stood with a deeper certainty than ever. True belonging isn't granted by bloodlines or invitations. It's forged by courage, vision, and the willingness to claim your own space. As I drove away, the turquoise lake fading behind me, I felt the full force of having turned the tables not by spite but by building something more vibrant and inclusive than I'd ever been allowed to imagine. I'm Madison Blake, and I've known Emily Carter since our freshman year at UC Berkeley, when we bonded over late-night cramming sessions and ramen that cost us less than $3 a bowl. Watching her journey from nervous art student to powerhouse creative director has been one of my greatest joys, and I have a front row seat to every triumph and heartache. When Emily first told me about her in-laws' Lake Tahoe retreat, I could feel her excitement through the phone. She spent $38.00 on artisanal dark chocolate truffles to gift Evelyn, and another $45.00 on a custom leather journal for Heather's Pilates teacher fiancé. Little gestures meant to weave herself more tightly into that blood relatives-only circle. I admired her devotion. She'd already invested nearly $1,000.00 on gifts, travel, and cabin deposits before the exclusion text arrived. I remember how her voice cracked. They said there's no room left, but they booked 120 people. I wanted to scream at her injustice, but I knew she needed strategy, not sympathy. After that brutal weekend, I watched Emily retreat into herself, wrestling with disbelief. I flew up from Sacramento the next morning, $120.00 on Amtrak plus a Lyft surge fare, to lend a hand. At the Truckee Cafe, I saw her hunched over that leather journal, pen flying across pages. She sketched Emerald Bay Estate like she was uncovering buried treasure. I sat across from her, ordering two $6.00 oat milk lattes, and watched the shift. The same trembling hands that shook with tears began to map budgets, outline workshops, and tally guest deposits. It was like witnessing a phoenix rising from its ashes. When she called me 2 days later to say, "I've booked the estate for $3,400.00 plus deposit," I flew into action. I designed the Uncharted Creativity poster pro bono, $180.00 at a local print shop, and prepped social media teasers. I even fronted Emily $180.00 for the first batch of custom metal badges when she asked, knowing she'd reimbursed me once those 30 deposits cleared. By the end of our 48-hour invitation window, my inbox pinged with 28 payment confirmations. I think I paid the $25.00 an hour virtual assistant Anna more in tips than her actual rate, because she moved mountains to coordinate shuttle schedules and workshop kits. When opening day arrived, I watched Emily greet every guest as if they were old friends, despite just meeting them online days before. She handled panicked texts about acrylic paints with calm authority, and deflected her in-laws' awkward arrival with the same poise she uses to pitch seven-figure ad campaigns. Standing on that makeshift lakeside stage, I saw her eyes glisten as she recounted the $350.00 invoice twist. Cheering erupted, and I felt my chest swell with pride. One moment I'll never forget. During our live critique under lanterns, I glanced at the shoreline and saw Richard and Evelyn's SUV creeping into view. Emily paused the live stream, gave them a measured nod, and then turned back to her creative allies without a flicker of doubt. In that instant, I realized she'd transcended the role of wronged daughter-in-law. She had become a leader who redefined belonging on her own terms. 6 months later, I met Emily at her Brooklyn pop-up gallery, another $3,200.00 investment on her part, to celebrate the success of her retreat. Turned brag. Over glasses of $14.00 natural wine, she toasted to the future creative scholarship she'd launched with her retreat profit. And I, forever her sidekick, couldn't help but think, no exclusion text, no cold shoulder wedding invitation, and no 120-guest cabin roster could ever hold her back. She built her own table and invited the world to pull up a chair. I didn't expect to feel vindicated watching their world unravel, but the ripples from my retreat hit the Collins family harder than I ever imagined. Less than 48 hours after the final live critique, I began seeing the backlash unfold, first online, then in my own inbox. It started with a notification on my phone, a screenshot from Jessica showing a furious email chain between Evelyn and Heather. They were blaming each other for letting Emily's invoice stunt go public, arguing over who should issue the official apology. Heather's scathing line, next time I'll just ghost her texts, was circulating on Twitter under the hashtag Collinsgate. I scrolled through the thread, hundreds of comments mocking the family's pettiness, dozens of creative accounts reposting it alongside clips from my retreat. By midday, the local Tahoe news site ran a story titled "Family Feud Erupts After Daughter-in-Law's Creative Coup," quoting neighbors who'd never spoken openly before. One contributor, the cafe owner across from their Napa farmhouse, told the reporter, "I always thought they were perfect, but now they've shown their true colors." I winced reading it, but a small smile tugged at my lips. They'd sowed the wind, now they were reaping a storm. On Friday evening, my phone rang with an unfamiliar area code. I answered, half expecting another sponsor. Instead, it was Peter Klein, the Collins' longtime PR consultant. His voice was flat, professional, but brittle. "Emily, hi. I represent your in-laws. We'd like to schedule a conference call." I cut in, calmly folding my retreat leatherhead. "Peter, with all due respect, I'm not interested in managing their public image. I've watched them manage mine for years." He hesitated. "Understood, but their reputation is suffering. You've built quite the narrative. Wouldn't you consider working with them on a joint statement?" I closed my eyes. A joint statement. After invoicing me, intentionally excluding me, then showing up uninvited? No. No, I said, firmly. They've had their chance. I hung up before he could reply. Meanwhile, on Instagram, the Collins official Family Foundation account posted a pale blue graphic. "Our apologies to Emily Carter," in Helvetica bold. Beneath it, a 2-sentence statement acknowledging poor judgment and promising a renewed commitment to inclusion. The comments flooded in, over 2,300 at last count, with more than 1,000 people tagging friends. "Can you believe this? That's gaslighting. Real apologies would fund her scholarship, not sell it. Even Vogue Creative's editor told me, your retreat's success eclipsed their statement. Your movement has momentum they can only dream of." Then came the corporate fallout. Mark's sister Heather Cornerstone, down in Los Angeles, was slated to keynote an industry breakfast for a major lifestyle brand. 2 days before her talk, the event organizers reached out. "Heather, we're concerned about recent social media exposure of your family's exclusionary tactics. Are you prepared to address this on stage?" They offered to postpone her appearance or split the keynote with me. When she declined and insisted the retreat was a personal matter, they canceled her slot entirely, citing brand risk. An abrupt Heather Cornerstone keynote canceled alert popped up on LinkedIn, and within hours her inbox filled with interview requests, none of them from her preferred outlets. Back in San Francisco, I began receiving notes of gratitude from retreat attendees, photographers offering to mentor young women, writers pledging to join the Future Creative Scholarship Board, even Lexi asking to co-produce next year's edition. Their stories poured in. One attendee said she'd been so moved she invited her own estranged brother to a family gathering. Another told me she quit a lucrative design contract to start her own studio. The collective energy was palpable, and I realized that the Collins misstep had done more than embarrass them. It had highlighted a need for spaces that truly value diverse voices. One morning, I got a whisper through a mutual friend. Evelyn had requested a private visit to my studio. I considered it, then declined, diplomatically, via text. I wrote, "I appreciate you reaching out. At this moment I need to keep my focus on the creatives who showed up. If you'd like to support the scholarship fund directly, I'll happily send information." I never heard back. The coup de grace arrived 2 weeks later when a Sunday brunch columnist in the San Francisco Chronicle published a profile headlined "From Rejection to Renaissance: How One Creative Director Upended a Dynastic Family Retreat." It wasn't a neutral piece, it was celebratory, tracing my entire journey from the sting of that $350 invoice to launching a scholarship with the first year's profits. They closed with, "In the end, real power doesn't lie in who you exclude, but in who you empower." By then, the Collins family's social channels were all but dormant. Their last post, a lavender-hued sunset over Tahoe, went up without caption or comment. No explanation, no engagement. It felt like they'd retreated, swallowed by their own miscalculation. As for me, I was on a flight to New York, invited to speak at a creative conference. In the weeks since the retreat, I'd leveraged my story into new collaborations: a feature in Artisan magazine, a guest lecture at the School of Visual Arts, even an offer to co-host a podcast on creative resilience. My calendar pulsed with interviews and panel invitations. Nothing like the silent treatment I'd grown accustomed to from my in-laws. The moment I closed my laptop at JFK, I realized how far I'd come. The same family that once issued an invoice to pretend invite me had fueled my most powerful statement, the Uncharted Creativity Retreat. Their downfall wasn't mine to orchestrate, but I witnessed it with quiet satisfaction, and then let it go. I built something more enduring than their legacy of privilege, a community bound by shared vulnerability and creative courage. And in that truth, I found my deepest victory. No apology could ever match it, because I had rewritten my story, and theirs had unraveled in the telling. I stepped off the plane into LaGuardia's humid spring air, my carry-on slung over one shoulder, heart still thrumming from the whirlwind of the last few weeks. In the taxi to Brooklyn, I watched the skyline blur past, each tower a testament to reinvention, much like my own story. That afternoon, I'd be speaking at a Creative Resilience Summit, sharing the uncharted creativity journey. But before I took that stage, I carried with me something more precious than any talking points: a profound lesson in self-worth. Back home in San Francisco, life had already shifted. My inbox overflowed with invitations to collaborate, a podcast series on turning betrayal into breakthrough, a guest column for Fast Company, and a commission to design the next year's Women Who Create Gala. More importantly, the Future Creative Scholarship, seeded with my retreat profits, received its first applications from young women across the country. I'd allocated $5,000, 0 cents in grants for emerging artists, and I understood that the ripple effect of one person's courage could fund and fund again. At the summit, I opened with a slide of Emerald Bay's turquoise waters at sunrise. The audience leaned in as I recounted the cold sting of that $350, 0 cents invoice. My in-laws' thinly veiled way of including me on paper but excluding me in reality. I described the raw grief that drove me to a roadside breakdown, tears mingled with Tahoe snowflakes, and the pivotal phone call with Diane, who challenged me to channel my pain into creation. Their nods and murmurs of recognition affirmed a universal truth: we've all faced the moment when someone defines our value, and we must decide whether to accept or rewrite that definition. I walked them through the birth of the Uncharted Creativity Retreat, securing Emerald Bay Estate for $3,400, 0 cents plus deposit, inviting 30 artists to invest $600, 0 cents each, crafting workshops around betrayal stories, and turning exclusion into an immersive exhibition. I shared candid metrics: $18,000, 0 cents in revenue, $16,290, 0 cents in costs, $1,710, 0 cents profit that launched a scholarship, and the moment my in-laws tried to gatecrash as VIPs, only to be turned away with the same criteria they'd used on me. The room erupted in applause at that twist. Blood relatives only, I'd told them. Here we welcome talent relatives first. Then came my final lesson slide. Belonging isn't granted, it's built. I looked out at a sea of faces, designers, writers, photographers, entrepreneurs, and said, I spent years trying to be enough for people who never intended to make room for me. I believed their silence and their thin apologies defined my worth. But when I chose creation over collapse, I realized I'd always held the power to define my value. The retreat wasn't ransom, it was renaissance. I closed with a charge to the audience. When you encounter closed doors, don't stand outside knocking. Build your own door and invite those who see and honor your genius. That's where real community lives. The standing ovation that followed felt like home, a community of people unwilling to settle for permission slips when they could draft their own invitations. That evening, over drinks at a rooftop bar overlooking Williamsburg, colleagues toasted my journey. Lexi Martinez raised her glass to rewriting the script. Marcus Lee chimed in to turning betrayal into breakthrough. And I realized the true measure of my victory wasn't in the press coverage or the scholarship, it was in the sparks of possibility I'd ignited in others. In the days that followed, I hosted the first round of scholarship awardees via Zoom. I saw their hopeful faces, high school seniors and recent grads clutching their portfolios, and felt a surge of purpose. Their creativity was no longer hypothetical. It was funded, supported, and celebrated. One recipient, a mixed media artist from Portland, told me, "Your story showed me that rejection can be the prelude to my boldest work. I couldn't ask for a more fitting legacy." Meanwhile, the Collins family's brief apology, their Pale Jupiter Instagram post, remained unsigned by any further action. They offered no donation to the scholarship, no public support. But that silence no longer hurt me. It underscored the divide I'd already bridged on my own terms. I'd moved from seeking their acceptance to creating a platform where acceptance was a given, not a privilege. That shift in mindset transformed every aspect of my life. On a quiet Sunday morning, I returned to the overlook above Emerald Bay, journal in hand. I opened to the first page the day of my collapse and read my words. Why am I always one click away from being erased? Beneath the recovery spark entry, book the estate, build a new table. I traced those lines with my finger and smiled at how far I'd come. I closed the journal and looked out at the shimmering water below, the same view that once felt like a boundary. Now it felt like a canvas, vast, open, awaiting the next story. My story had turned a betrayal into a beacon for others, proving that ending one narrative could start 10 new ones. And that was the truest resolution. Understanding that our greatest setbacks often seed our most transformative comeback. As I drove away, the salt of Tahoe on the air, I felt both humility and exhilaration. I had learned the art of self-sufficiency, not in solitude, but in solidarity, with every creative who chose to build rather than beg. And if I ever doubted my place again, I knew where to look. At the doors I'd built, the tables I'd laid, and the community I'd welcomed. That was my final, unshakable lesson. You belong where you belong because you decide.